Hi, I'm Roxy Keller, and this is Baking with Roxy. I am baking my way through the Great British Baking Show challenges, and I'm on week 4 of season 5 from 2017, and it's caramel week. So this is actually going to be really interesting for me because I've never made caramel, and it's supposed to be one of the hardest things to do. Many people had challenges during the show. So we'll see. I'll do my best, and something good will come of it, I'm sure. So the first challenge, of course, is the signature challenge, and the bakers are challenged to make 18 identical Millionaire Shortbreads. So a Millionaire Shortbread, the very basic shortbread, is a shortbread cookie with a layer of caramel and a layer of chocolate. And as long as it has 3 distinct layers in some sort of a bar cookie, they can be round. People on the show some did round, some did heart-shaped, some did rectangles. There are many different ways that they can look, and you can add just about anything to the shortbread, to the caramel flavors, to the chocolate. You can use dark chocolate, milk chocolate, whatever you want, and then they typically put some sort of a sprinkle or decoration on top. I have been struggling to figure out which ones I want to make because every time I read a new recipe, I think I want to make that one because it sounds so good. And one example is my favorite podcast, Home Baking. Her website, Flour, Butter, Eggs, Sugar, has several different recipes. One is the basic shortbread. Then there is a thyme hazelnut. There's one that is sour cherry and pistachio. There's another one that's her favorite, is halva and tahini. It's a Middle Eastern Millionaire Shortbread. And I have some tahini. I don't have halva. And so one day I'll make those, but that won't be today. I settled on using some recipes and ingredients that I already have in my pantry because I see these recipes and I often buy some of these ingredients and never use them or don't use them for a while until I figure out what I'm going to use them for. So one example is speculoos cookies. Most likely some of you have heard of speculoos cookies. These are speculoos cookies or Biscoff cookies, and they taste like gingerbread, maybe with some pumpkin spice, something like that. But they smell amazing, they're delicious, and people have now made a butter out of these cookies. It's called cookie butter. I mean, how can you go wrong with a butter made of cookies? So the first Millionaire Shortbread that I'm going to make comes from a website called Sugar Salt Magic, and it's called Biscoff Millionaire Shortbreads. I'm adding something to it, as I always do. I'm going to add some orange zest to the chocolate, and I'm going to add some almonds in with the Biscoff cookies, a little bit of almond slivers on top, and yeah, I think all those flavors will go well together. So let's get started. I get to use my food processor today because I need to process the cookies, and the recipe for an 8x8 pan calls for 250 Biscoff cookies, and of course that's how much is in this package. So we're going to process these cookies. I'm going to blend the 250 grams of Biscoff cookies to a fine crumb. Well, that was easy enough. To the processed cookies, I'll add 100 grams of melted butter, and his recipe calls for unsalted butter and then adds a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Well, a stick of salted butter has about a 1/4 teaspoon. That's what I use, so I'll just use the butter and no extra salt. 100 grams of melted salted butter. I'll process that to combine. with most shortbread recipes, they involve flour, sugar, and butter. Since this uses pre-made cookies, we don't need to add sugar and we don't need to bake it. So this is just going to be pressed into the base of an 8-inch by 8-inch baking pan, and I've lined that with parchment paper. But first I want to add the almonds. I have some toasted almonds from a previous bake that I did. I have saved these in the freezer. That's 75 grams of almonds. I'm going to chop those. Okay, again, we want to chop them just enough to get a fine crumb, and then I'll pour them in with the cookies. I remove the blade so that I can just blend these with a spoon. Now I can press that into this pan. I'll just press this down with the back of a measuring cup. Do a spoon. I like to use a spatula so I can get into the corners. Okay, now I'm just going to chill that until the caramel's ready. For the caramel, it says I need 125 grams of butter. So clearly this is not an American baker because that's a little over 1 stick or half a cup. So it just makes you cut into more than 1 stick. 1 stick is about 113 grams. Once I get the butter melted in the saucepan, then I'll add 100 grams of brown sugar. And the recipe calls for light brown sugar, but I always use dark. Okay, so let's move over to the saucepan and wish me luck. Okay, so for the caramel, I start with the 125 grams of salted butter. Heat it over low-medium heat. So this could take a while. It's getting there. I got a little impatient and cut the butter up a little bit to speed it up. The butter is melted, so I'm adding 100 grams of dark brown sugar. And I need to stir this, let it cook down and dissolve the sugar until I can barely feel the granules in there. When I press the silicone spoon on the bottom, I can feel that there are still granules. So I want to keep heating until those granules are gone. Okay, I think the grittiness is just about gone. So now I'm going to add, this is how, another reason I know this is not an American baker, and I figured out from some notes that it's an Australian baker, is that they call the can that the sweetened condensed milk in a tin. So I'm adding 1 tin, T-I-N, of sweetened condensed milk. So this is a 14-ounce can. Okay, so the instructions say to increase the temperature. I'm going to wait on that since I have an electric stove top. It turns on and off, and I don't really trust it when I turn it up. It tends to get very hot very quickly. So I'm supposed to stir this until I see bubbles and keep stirring until the mixture turns from a beige to a golden and becomes thickened.
It's definitely a beige color right now. But the ultimate and the best way to test it is to use a thermometer. So I'll use my instant read thermometer, and on the British Baking Show they were saying to heat it until you get to, I don't know, some were saying 113 degrees Celsius, 118 degrees Celsius. This recipe says 110 degrees Celsius or 225 Fahrenheit. So that's what I'll do. Turning it up just a little bit. Well, it has started bubbling. I'm going to turn it back down a little bit, just again because of my stove. But I'm going to stir constantly for about 4 or 5 minutes, then I'll take the temperature. I'm continuing to stir, and in addition to my instant read thermometer, I have one of these candy thermometers that shows soft ball stage at about 250 degrees Fahrenheit. So I kind of feel like that's the temperature I want. So I might let it go higher than this recipe calls for at 225. I don't want it to be so soft that it doesn't set in the bars. 226. The next step is to take the caramel off the stove and add in 2 tablespoons of the cookie butter. And again, this one says that's 2 Australian tablespoons, which are apparently smaller than American tablespoons. So I'm still going to add 2 American tablespoons because a little bit more cookie butter is not going to hurt anything. It's just going to make it taste better. All right, it's really getting thick now. Let's see what the temperature is. It's about 230, so I'm going to go with that. 2 tablespoons of cookie butter. Get that stirred really well. Okay, it says that I can pour this over the cookie base, so I'll go and grab that. This is my Biscoff cookie base with almonds, and I'm adding the Biscoff caramel. And it says to let that chill for at least 15 minutes. So I'll put that in the refrigerator and make the chocolate topping.
While the caramel is setting up, I'm going to zest these 3 tangelos again. I'm using up this bag, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to use this in my Millionaire Shortbread. If you only have oranges, maybe just the zest of 2 oranges, however much you like. So I'm going to zest these 3 and then start melting the chocolate. The choice of chocolate can depend on a lot of things, depend on your own taste, but also the mix-ins that you have in your shortbread and your caramel. So if you have more tart ingredients like raspberry or lemon, things like that, then you often want to use a milk chocolate because it's sweeter. And if you use sweet ingredients like cookie butter, then you'll probably want to use a darker chocolate. On Flour, Butter, Egg, Sugar, she tends to mix a dark and a milk chocolate, dark being 55% or more cocoa. And I have some Hershey Special Dark Chocolate, which is 45%, and I think this is about as dark as I want for my Biscoff cookie Millionaire Shortbread. So I'm going to use Hershey's Special Dark. I'm going to melt some of this, and then I'm also going to melt a little bit of cookie butter, because when the caramel is set, I'm going to pour on the melted chocolate, then drizzle a little bit of the cookie butter and run a toothpick through it just to make a nice little design, and then top it with some sliced almonds. I have sliced almonds that I toasted for just about 4 minutes. I wanted them to get nice and crunchy, and those will decorate the top as well. The recipe calls for 250 grams of chocolate, and of course this bar is only $2.14, so fortunately I have more bars. 250 grams of Hershey's Special Dark Chocolate at 45% cocoa. I decided to grab this bowl instead. I think it will melt and be able to stir more easily. Okay, so the caramel is set. It is still a bit soft, but I think it's supposed to have that texture so that when you bite into it, it's not too tough. And I melted the chocolate.
Now I'm going to pour that over the caramel, and then on top of that I'll pour some melted cookie butter.
First I want to add my orange zest to the chocolate. That's going on the caramel. I think the orange zest tightened up that chocolate a bit, and probably just pouring it on that cold caramel. So, a little bit difficult to spread.
Well, I don't think it was supposed to look that rough and ready, but that's all right.
Still gonna pour the cookie butter over.
Try to drizzle it just to give it a nice design.
I'm supposed to move a toothpick through it, but I don't think that's gonna work. We're just gonna leave it like that. The last thing I need to do is crumble on some of these slightly toasted and sliced almonds.
You know, another really good topping would be a little bit of candied orange, because they often say that you should have decorations that hint at the flavors in your baked goods. I do have some.
Try to press that down into the chocolate a little bit, into the cookie butter, so that it'll set when the chocolate sets. Okay, so that needs to go in the refrigerator for a couple of hours. On the Great British Baking Show, of course, the contestants only had to make one type of Millionaire Shortbread, but because I have so many recipes that I want to try, I'm going to make another one. So this one is going to be pecan and cranberry. I'm going to use the traditional recipe for shortbread, which is 3 parts flour, 2 parts butter, and 1 part sugar. And then I'll just trade out some of the flour for crushed pecans. So I'll start with 118 grams of all-purpose flour into a food processor, 113 grams of butter. I'm using salted butter, and 50 grams of crushed toasted pecans. I already have my toasted pecans that I toasted in the oven at 350 degrees for about 7 to 8 minutes. So to the flour and butter, I'm adding 50 grams of chopped toasted pecans. Finally, 56 grams of powdered sugar. Okay, I'll process that until it becomes the texture of breadcrumbs, or kind of like a dough. I don't have another 8-inch square baking pan, so I'm going to use an 8-inch round, and I sprayed a bit of baking spray. Fortunately, I have some pre-cut 8-inch round parchment papers. So I'll press that down with my cup. It's a bit sticky, so I'm going to put a little bit of nice powdered sugar on the bottom of it. Okay, so that's going into a 350-degree oven for 20 to 25 minutes until the edges are just turning golden brown. You don't want it to overbake. While that's in the oven, I'll start making the caramel. And interestingly, the recipe on flour, butter, egg, sugar is quite similar to the one that I made for the Biscoff cookie Millionaire Shortbreads. And they all say to use light brown sugar. Even on the Great British Baking Show, their recipe for the technical challenge says to use light brown sugar, but that's not what it looked like they were using in their pans. It looked like they were starting with granulated sugar. So, I don't know. But this one will be very much like the caramel that I used for the Biscoff cookie Millionaire Shortbreads, except I won't use the cookie butter. I think I might add some larger chunks of the chopped pecan to that caramel. That should add a nice crunch.
To make the caramel, I'm starting with 125 grams of salted butter over low to medium heat until melted. The butter's melted, so I'm going to add 100 grams of dark brown sugar. And I need to heat this until all of the sugar granules have melted. And that takes a couple of minutes, still on medium-low temperature. It's getting there. I think we're really close to being ready to put in the next ingredient, which is the sweetened condensed milk. It's just starting to bubble a little bit. I can barely feel any granules. One 14-ounce can of sweetened condensed milk. Now I'm supposed to turn up the heat a little bit. I'm not going to turn it up quite as high as it says because of my electric stove. I don't trust it to not get too hot. So this should be heated until it reaches a temperature of at least 225 degrees Fahrenheit. The last batch I did, I let it go to 230 just to make sure it would be set and not too runny. It's been about 3 minutes and I'm going to use my instant read thermometer. We are already at about 205, so still a couple minutes. This one looks a little better than the last one. I'm not quite sure why. It's kind of mesmerizing, isn't it? As long as I don't touch the bottom. 225. Just looks ready. So I took it off the heat. I'm going to add 80 grams of coarsely chopped pecans. Maple extract. 1 tablespoon of maple extract. Ooh, that smells good. Okay, now this goes directly onto the shortbread crust.
While I was making the caramel, the timer for the shortbread went off, and I put it in for a total of 22.5 minutes, and is golden brown. The caramel is ready, so I'm going to pour this directly onto the shortbread. Okay, now I need to let that cool and then add the chocolate and cranberries. I'm going to put this in the refrigerator so it can set more quickly. I'm going to coarsely chop the dried cranberries. That looks like a good amount, so let's see how much that is. $70 grams.
So again, I used the Hershey's Special Dark, which has 45% cocoa.
Now I'll top that with 70 grams of chopped dried cranberries. And finally, just to lighten up that color a little bit, I have some white chocolate chips. I'm going to melt those and drizzle that on just to give it a little more pizzazz. So the white chocolate didn't get super thin, so I put it in a piping bag. I should be able to drizzle it now. And I realized that being in a round pan means that I won't be able to make 18 identical shapes, but I will have different sizes, and then people can choose if they want a larger one or a smaller one. Okay, so I'm going to let that cool and set in the refrigerator for a couple of hours, and I'll come back and show you both of my Millionaire Shortbreads cut into pieces. Well, they are both set, so now I just need to get them out of these pans and cut. so for the almond orange, I'm making them 3 centimeters wide. Then this way, I will just cut them in half. So, cookie crust is not staying together very well. It's a bit disappointing. I think it needed more butter. Okay, now the cranberry almond. It's only hard because that chocolate gets rather hard. Shortbread looks nice. You know, I was thinking that I would cut them with perpendicular lines and have different sizes, but I could actually cut it like a little pizza. That might be cool. I think I'll try it. Caramel's a little soft. It's squeeging out a little bit as I press down on this. Okay, well, the white chocolate doesn't look so good, but let's see if I can place them on this nice turntable. I can try the bits and the bites. There's enough caramel and cookie, not much chocolate in this bite, but it is good. Well, this is it for this episode. These are pretty amazing looking and they taste amazing. So I think they'd be a hit. I might even get a handshake. So cranberry, pecan, orange, chocolate, almond, and speculoos cookies or Biscoff cookies. Okay, so that's all for this episode, and 2 Millionaire Shortbread bars, and they're both delicious. So next episode is the technical challenge, and I'll be making stroop waffles. You can look it up. It is I think it's the national cookie of Holland, and it's a little super thin waffle type cookie with a smear of caramel in between. And for For the show that this was on, not a single one of the bakers got the caramel right, but I'll give it a try. So technical challenge is stroopwafels. Please like, share with your friends, and leave me comments or ask questions if you have any comments. Thank you. So my husband Chauncey decided that he wanted to give these a try. So this one is pecan cranberry. And this one is chocolate. Well, that one's chocolate too, but this one's almond, orange, and speculoos cookies.
Okay.
All right.
All right. So let's try the first one first. Chocolate's very hard. It's very good. The chocolate's just a little bit hard.
Yeah.
But flavor's amazing.
What's
Flavor's
the balance of everything? Just all.
Very good.
You got
Very good.
pecans, you got cranberries.
And it tastes like something that a dessert I had when I was growing up, but I cannot put my finger on. I'll have to let you know about that later. Let's try the second one here. Chocolate's
it's a candy bar, so it's kind of.
We'll just do this.
Yeah.
We're going old school.
That's the way Prue and Paul did it anyway.
Good. Tasty orange zest. Yeah. Good balance of flavors. Yeah, they're both delicious. You guys should try them. Yeah, very good.
All right, cool. Thanks.